Live now,
Okay.
so we can talk, but I just got that thing up, so they can't see us, they can hear us if they're listening.
Oh, that's
If they
cool.
have a volume up right now.
If anybody wants to listen. I don't know. We have one listener. We'll see. Maybe we get 5 today. I don't know. Talk about difficult births. Of course, we have a topic. It's the magic topic.
You can always weave that in.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I can't.
Yeah, see, that's the sweaters from there. It's
That's mine.
similar. Well, it's different, slightly different pattern.
Sure it is, but it might be still from the same cult
Ha!
or whatever.
There you go. But yeah, it's really good. I just love how warm they are. And they're actually naturally resistant to water too.
Oh.
Believe it or not, the way they weave them.
I don't know
So
how
it's
that
all their
works.
fishermen that wear them. They wear them on the ocean.
Well,
So the only time that they
let's turn this up. We're gonna go live right now, okay?
Okay.
You guys up for that? Okay, let's play this game, shall we?
Greetings, Internet friends. Welcome to another episode of the Synergy Cafe online show, featuring speaker, entertainer, close-up illusionist, and marketing alchemist, Magic Brad. It's the Internet lifestyle show about career, finance, relationships, spirituality, and wellness. We're moving the online chatter over to real-life activity. And now, please welcome your host of Synergy Cafe, Magic Brad.
And we're live! Sweet. So, hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and berries. It's me and Casey Peak in Peak Studios here in the World Nerve Center headquarters of New Hope.
Right.
Yes. Do you know where New Hope is? Some people do, some people don't. You know, I got this sarcastic thing when somebody says, "So what's new?" And I go, New York, Newfoundland, New Hope, New Guinea, New Brig, New Ulm. So now we're in New Hope. And guess what? We're going to talk about magic today. But Casey is a new father, so that's magic right there. It's kind of a magical thing.
Woo-hoo. Yep, for the third time.
Yeah, keep it up. What'd you do, switch on me?
No, this one's mine. That one's yours.
See, he's trying to do that magic switcheroo thing.
Yep.
Check me. So you just got a new baby.
Yep.
And you said it was a hard birth, not just for her.
Oh, it was extremely difficult. Yeah. Yeah, there's a thing called shoulder dystocia. It's whenever basically the baby's not spinning correctly as it comes out, because they actually flip over as they come out because the head
They
comes
do like
through.
gymnastics.
Yeah, they actually their back is towards the belly. It's not back to back, it's back to front. And then their head starts to come out and their head twists as it comes out in order to make it through the hips. And then the shoulders go with it, and then the baby ends up face up at the end, right? But if the baby's not spinning correctly, or if the baby's too big, which is our case because it was 9 pounds, 7.3 ounces, and a 14.5-inch head and 21 inches long. So it was a big baby. And for those of you who tuned in last week, you saw my wife. She is not big. She's a small lady. So, that was a rather large baby, a full pound bigger than her previous largest baby.
Jeez.
So that is quite large. And the head was having a hard time coming out because the head was so big. And then finally, after the head came out, the head was stuck. And the reason why it was stuck is because of shoulder dystocia, and the shoulder just can't make it through the pelvis region.
Mm-hmm.
So the front of the pelvis it's not able to flex enough to get the large shoulders through. So they actually have to go in, much like they do with like a calf, being born from cow. You reach in, sometimes you have to kind of help, or maybe with a horse, you might have to do that. You grab the hooves kind of help with that. This is similar, and they have to reach in, they have to grab the shoulders, and they have to turn the shoulders to get it out. But he was stuck for a full minute and 15 seconds. And so a minute and 15 seconds is long enough for the oxygen level to drop to make the baby weak enough to actually have a little bit of a hard time expelling the excess amniotic fluid. So he was not breathing for 2 minutes. So we were.
So they're not breathing when they're still inside, right?
Yeah, they don't breathe until they come out.
And then he's able to breathe, and all of a sudden he's not able to breathe.
Well, yeah, so he came out, and then vaginal muscles are still around the neck. Just can't breathe, he's being choked, basically. But then on top of that, all of the muscles on the inside, right, are all clamping down around his chest and everything else. So he can't take in that breath. So he can't take in that breath until he fully makes it all the way out.
Right.
And then once he makes it all the way out, he's got to have the strength to be able to, and expel that amniotic fluid to take a full breath, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that just wasn't happening. The lungs were filled with the amniotic fluid, which is a little bit more than usual. And because the birth was just difficult. And, at one point his head was coming down and she was like, okay, I can feel the head. And then he kind of went backwards because he was stuck in that, going through the hips.
Mm-hmm.
It went backwards. But yeah, he couldn't take that first breath. So they ended up having to do CPR. And it took 45 seconds from the time he came out, because it was a minute, 15 seconds he came out. And it was 45 seconds until he took that first breath, which was a long time. And so at that 2-minute mark, he was able to breathe, but he was still having this, I can't remember what they call it, but basically it's where the ribs pop out, the stomach caves in, showing that they can't actually expand their lungs. And that means that there's too much fluid in the lungs. So then they had to put oxygen on them. And then they tried a little bit of suction, which helped. They did a little bit of suction, suck it out, through the nose, all of that, to try and help him breathe a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But it took 8 minutes. So it was at 8 minutes after birth. And they count at the point where the head popped out. So it was full minute, 8 minutes after birth. He had to be assisted with a CPAP machine and oxygen. And then at 8 minutes after, he was able to be taken off that. And then by 10 minutes, he was fine. Like, he was all back to normal. Like, all of his vitals and everything were great. And he's thriving now. And most babies, at 6 days after birth, most babies have not gained above their birth weight. They're still below their birth weight because you lose weight after you're born. And he is already above his birth weight. So he's thriving. He's doing exceptionally well. That just shows you that if this birth would have been, even 60 years ago, he might not have made it.
Sure. Yeah, a lot of technology.
Yeah.
And to segue into the topic, what's the baby's name?
Alexander Merlin Lore Peak.
Merlin appears.
Yeah.
So got that Houdini thing down to be able to hold the breath long enough to
right.
escape.
Yeah. And the name's really cool too. My wife and I, we by happenstance, whenever we named our first child together, his name was William Arthur Lachlan Peak. And it means helmeted warrior, bear king of the lake. And she was like, that is a really awesome name. I don't think we'll be able to just give our kids like normal names here on out, because that's just like a really awesome name. And so he's so proud of it too. He goes to his preschool. He goes to preschool and he goes, my name is William Arthur Lachlan Peak, helmeted warrior, bear king of the lake. So everybody called him Bear King. So it's really funny. So our second is named Loa Luna Peak, which Loa, going back to the topic of magic, right? In Haitian voodoo, Loa is a type of spirit. So it's like a helping spirit.
Mm-hmm.
They're powerful helping spirits. And so it's basically Luna, of course, is moon.
Yeah.
So the name would translate then to Spirit Moon. And then Alexander Merlin Lore Peak is defender of man, keeper of magic and stories. Alexander Merlin Lore Peak.
I see a book in the future.
Yeah. And of course, the cool thing about that is that it's Alexander Merlin and then William Arthur. So you have that story in there too.
King Arthur.
Right?
How do you know all this stuff?
I'm nerdy and learn a lot of stuff. I just have a variety of topics.
Before we started the show, he was talking about my sweater and the Irish knit and patterns and all sorts of stuff. It's just a freaking sweater to me.
Right. I'm just weird. That's all. I see things and I hear things and I find knowledge interesting, and it doesn't matter the type of knowledge. And that's how I've made my money over the years. And
Well, I've got a hypnotist friend. He says he's just curious, but he knows John Ivan Palmer. He knows. He's like a walking encyclopedia, so he knows all sorts of stuff about like flowers and their scientific names.
Yeah.
And all that stuff, and all these different grasses that he's got in his yard. He knows the grasses, and his
That's
wife
cool.
is Japanese, so he has them labeled in Japanese so he can see the plant and know what it is in Japanese too.
That's
And he
cool.
just knows a lot of stuff.
Nice.
And I probably know a lot of stuff too, but it's nothing that's really interesting, I guess. I know a lot of stuff about like digital marketing and human behavior and weird stuff like that. Self-taught, primarily.
You're a professional magician, though, stage
The
magician.
magic thing. I mean, that's an interesting.
You have to know a lot in order to do that, especially about human behavior.
It's mostly about human behavior, which our topic is sort of does magic, or it says magic does exist, and then the question is, does magic exist? And I had mentioned that before we decide whether it exists or not, we need to agree on the definition of what magic is. So what's magic to you?
I thought about it long and hard over the years, and I think that if you were to define magic, it's an intangible means that is not measurable with current science in order to affect change in our reality that can't be explained.
That's a deep one. And it's very similar to what I believe it is. It's a shifting of perception, and it's the ability to do something that is seemingly impossible.
That's a good one too.
Because that's kind of what happens is, and the reason I think magic is interesting as far as the sleight of hand element of it, unlike juggling or playing guitar or drumming or dancing, is all the stuff that's the work is hidden. So when you, like, if a magician takes a card and he changes the card from the Ace of Spades to the Queen of Hearts, he's just like waving the card. That's all it looks like, he's waving the card.
Right.
But you don't see all the stuff behind that makes it change.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or to
And
make
there's
it
like
point.
50 different ways to do it too. That's the cool thing.
Yeah, like people say, like, how does David Copperfield make an elephant disappear? Because now he's going to make the moon disappear. It's the same principles as making a coin disappear, basically. The art of deception and misdirection and making people perceive certain things certain ways. It's the same thing. It's just it's a different object, is all. And what was interesting again to me is all the work that goes into it that you don't even see.
Right.
And then people think, oh, you just hid it up your sleeve. Well, how did it get up the sleeve? That's amazing.
Right.
How did it go from one place up the sleeve? Maybe it didn't disappear, but how did it get up the sleeve?
Yeah. Yeah. And the simplest way that I learned how to do a couple of card tricks, these are little tiny ones that kids normally learn when they're first learning.
Well, you can't downplay that stuff because it still ends up being miraculous and seemingly impossible.
Absolutely.
Even if it's simple.
Yeah. So I learned how to do this one back in the day. That was these jokers, right? You have these four, it's 4 jacks. It was 4 jacks, and he had the 4 jacks, and he tell this whole tale and this whole story about traveling and how they all went, and he put the cards back where they go and everything else. And the whole thing was sleight of hand. You were basically holding the cards in such a way that you actually didn't notice that you were holding more cards than you were actually holding. So it looked like you were only holding 4 cards, but you were actually holding more than that. So you didn't have anything up your sleeve. There was nothing up your sleeve. You were actually just not perceiving everything that was there.
Right. The perception of the audience appears that there's 4 cards.
Yeah.
So your job is to handle the cards like it's 4 cards.
Yeah.
And then the audience just assumes, well, he's just got 4 cards.
Yeah. It's an automatic assumption, and you're showing them flat. So if you show them flat 4 cards, right, you can't see that there's a couple more cards in the back, right? If you were to look at it up the edge, you would see there's more there. However, you're showing it to them flat. So our brains make an extrapolation from there that tells you something that's more than what you can actually know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And there's situations that as you get into more of it, that it doesn't matter if someone's behind you to see the other 4 cards, because maybe you're holding them and you're moving them around and nobody really notices it because you're naturally moving them as you're gesturing.
Yeah.
So there's other ways of doing things depending on your environment. So that's the element of magic, of being able to do something that's seemingly impossible. And it isn't just the sleight of hand kind of thing, but so we'll get into some deeper stuff like the placebo effect. So if you do something to someone and they think that they're healed,
Mm-hmm.
because you created the illusion of them being healed, they may placeboically be healed. If that's a word, placebo.
I knew what you meant, though.
I know. Well, that's the thing about languages. It doesn't matter if it's a real word, as long as you know what the hell I'm talking about.
I think the placebo effect is definitely valid. Like going to a topic that I talk about often, like going to psychedelics in medicine, right? So if you're looking at psychedelic medicine, there's this whole idea that if you're taking a microdose, right, which is one of the things that I specialize in, is microdosing. And
There's your microphone.
right here.
Oh, you got it on there. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I got it on me. It's tucked.
He tricked me.
I'm-
He fooled me. His
I'm
microphone was
hiding it
under his
today.
sweater.
I'm being
thought it
careful in
fell off.
hiding it today.
Continue. I'm sorry.
So placebo effect is so microdosing. That's one of the things that I specialize in, right? Well, one of the things is that people say is, well, they're like, oh, that's just a placebo effect, right? That's one of the concepts that people have. Well, no, it's not. There's actually a bunch of theories of the science that actually goes into it. Of course, to start with, you have to tell everybody, we don't actually understand how this works. We just know that it does. And then you have to move from there, right? The science of it is so new that they're actually still learning about how it works on the brain and the body. And we have aspects of it that we understand, but we don't fully understand it. But tying it into the magic, right? That seems magical in that we don't actually understand how it works. But then on top of that, placebo effect, right? That's the idea. Like you can give somebody a sugar pill, and then they're going to start noticing that they feel better. Well, here's what's fascinating about it. One of the deepest studies, I was just listening to a whole thing on it the other day. One of the deepest studies they've actually been doing in Canada on microdosing and psychedelic healing on terminal patients. The data on it actually isn't out there yet. And it's one of the bigger studies that's being done. The whole reason why the data isn't out there on it is they took these terminal patients that were supposed to pass away. They started giving them these microdosing pills, and they started doing all of this with them. Here we are years later, way past the date they were supposed to pass away. Only 3 people in the study have passed away so far.
Mm-hmm.
So they're like, well, I don't know. Is it a placebo effect? Is it because their life is improved in other areas and just the idea of them having a better life is making them more healed, which there's scientific evidence for? What is it? It's hidden. It's magic.
It is hidden. It is hidden, and I believe it is a little bit of magic, because when you get into the alternate reality, or the superconscious, or the etheric,
Yeah.
all the different words for consciousness or God.
Yeah.
If someone is claimed to be terminal, and you have all that stuff going in your head, that's what's going to happen because that's where you're living. So if a person says, "Well, shit, I'm just going to die anyway, so I think I'll do some microdosing," and they take this hallucinogenic thing, and this takes their mind off of the concept of dying and being terminal.
But it's sub-hallucinogenic. Microdosing is sub-hallucinogenic. It's actually microdosing. So I guess it's important to define that. So microdosing is such a low dosage, you don't feel it. It's sub-perceptual.
Sure, but it's still perceptual.
So that's the trick. It's actually so low that you don't know that it's so low that you shouldn't feel anything. If you feel something, then it's actually too high.
Well, sure, but that's kind of what I'm
We're
getting.
talking about like 1/20th of a dose.
That's what I'm talking about. It's kind of like what's that other modality of what the hell is it called? You're actually taking a poison.
Oh, you're talking. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. You're talking about homeopathy.
Yes, that kind of thing. But it's
My wife is super into
It's a micro dose of something toxic, and your body can handle it, and it gets stronger.
The idea is that it's actually only contains one molecule of the original substance. So it's like basically they dilute it so much where it's only basically one molecule.
Yeah. So I think that's how something like a hallucinogenic or a microdose of something can work, in that it takes you away from your physical reality, this meat sack that we live in our body,
Right.
and our thinking. We're thinking about. I believe that you could think that you have a cold and you're going to get a cold. That's what your mind is thinking about. So if you can do anything that'll take your mind off of it, like even just more of a placebo of a microdose, where you're just thinking about, I wonder what this is going to do to me. It takes you off of that. The doctors told me I'm going to die.
Yeah.
So it takes you away from that, and now you're on a different path. But a lot of it is about focus. You're not having split energy. You're not thinking, I'm healthy, I'm dead, I'm going to die. You're focusing on
Right.
one thing, then everything's fine. I'm not feeling anything. It's a good thing, not feeling anything.
It is, yeah.
It's a meditative state. Like really in meditation, you focus on your breath.
Yeah.
You're not focusing on, oh, that hurts. My
Right.
back's sore. You're focusing on your breath, and it gets you in a neutral place, and then your back's not sore anymore.
Yeah.
That's magic.
That's the coolest thing about microdosing is that it's so low that like these people who are afraid to actually have some kind of mind-altering substance or something that actually would alter their perception at all, right? It's so low that they can be comfortable with it because it actually isn't altering your perception.
Right.
It only alters your perception by the fact that it helps your brain work like when you were young. Because we show statistically, that human beings, we make so many connections per day. So yeah, if you're a small child, it's actually 400 new neural connections a day. So literally by the end of the week, you have like a new brain. So it's pretty radical. But by the time that you're an adult, you only fortify connections. You're not really making very many new connections anymore. I think it's the age is like 28, whatever. You're not really making very many new connections anymore. Well, microdosing and psilocybin in general. Whenever I'm talking about a whole mushroom, though all the studies are only synthetic psilocybin, so that way they can actually weigh the dose and everything else, because everything has to be exactly perfect. They want to change that, but they just haven't done it yet. So going back to what I was saying though, so psilocybin and whole mushroom, they've shown like neurogenesis. So it actually, your brain begins to create new neural connections again, like you were a teenager. Like that.
I believe that. I believe you can reverse aging. I had a minor stroke, I went and had a thing where a guy put a little bonnet on my head with these little electrodes or whatever, this little stuff that was in there, and then he had hooked up to a TV set, and I sat and watched Tom Hanks movies. And as I was watching the movie, it was rewiring my brain because the volume would go down or the screen would start turning dark. So I wanted to watch the movie, so my thinking was, how can I make it right again? And my brain would figure out how to make it right and get the volume back up.
Nice.
So it reworked my brain because I had some stroke stuff in my head. And it said, well, heck, we don't need this stuff, we'll go around it.
Yeah.
And it reconnected stuff. Because I was in a neutral space. I wasn't thinking about how am I going to rewire my brain. I was watching Tom Hanks on that movie talking to that volleyball. I want to watch the movie.
Right.
So my brain just did its own thing.
Castaway, I think is what it's called, right?
Yeah. Wilson.
Yeah. Wilson!
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think that we still don't understand what's going on with the brain, and I think that is magical in and of itself, how the thing works.
Right.
It's not the size of it so much.
Yeah. Well, our brains work on a quantum level. That's actually the most interesting thing about human experience. Our physical bodies are trapped inside this three-dimensional realm, but our brains aren't. Our brains aren't actually trapped in 3 dimensions. Our brains work outside of 3 dimensions. Point in case, go to my difficult birth I just went through with my son, right? My son wasn't breathing for the first 2 minutes. So in my head, cognitive dissonance, right? And the quantum state of my brain, my son is both alive and made it and dead and didn't make it. So I'm going through the grief of having a dead son at the same time as I am convinced he's going to be okay and cheering him on.
Yeah,
right.
You chose.
And I'm trying to choose to be in the reality where he's alive and he's making it, right? That is, so in that quantum state, of course, the experiment of it is Schrodinger's cat. It's a really famous experiment. And they've actually done some really cool stuff with Schrodinger's cat. So if anybody wants to go look that up, I would definitely recommend looking it up. It's a fascinating study if you're not aware of it.
Have you, do you know Greg Braden? HeartMath?
HeartMath. That's something about that sounds familiar, but I can't.
You have to
recall.
look into that kind of stuff because there's talk about the heart has the same kind of capabilities as the brain does.
Yes.
Only it's not logical, it's an emotional thing.
Yeah.
And it projects out further. The energy projects out further than other energies.
Yeah.
Look up Greg Braden and HeartMath.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the theory. I don't think I've read anything from Greg Braden, but I'm very familiar with that theory. They're talking about how, you know, the heart and the nervous structure of the heart actually have it has its own memory.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever we go through an emotional trauma, that we hold it in our heart.
That's just it. The emotions in the heart and the logic is in the brain.
Right. That's actually one of the things that they talk about with ayahuasca. So a lot of the people with ayahuasca, they say that one of the unique things about ayahuasca is it helps the heart and the brain connect.
Yeah, it's like yoga.
Yeah. It's like a psychedelic yoga. Yeah. There's actually a few people I've known who do like extreme yoga and then they'll do it while they're on ayahuasca, and I'm like, that sounds like it would be a little weird. I've done a lot of yoga, but I'm nowhere near an expert. I just kind of I dabble in it.
Well, there's so many different kinds of it. Do you ever do the hot stuff, the Bikram?
I would love to. Or
That's
Hatha,
pretty intense.
Bikram or Hatha. They're both hot
different.
yogas. Yeah.
Bikram's got his 26 poses, I think it is. And
Yeah.
Very regimented. Hotter than heck, and they tell you not to eat 2 hours before you go, and they're serious.
Yeah. You make yourself sick.
Yeah, don't eat anything 2 hours before.
Yeah.
But I do that for a whole year. It's pretty intense.
Wow.
I enjoyed it. It was good.
Did it give you psychedelic experiences?
No.
You didn't get.
Well,
Did you get like an altered state at all?
Maybe, and I didn't notice it.
Okay,
But
that's fair.
because I have a lot of those situations, and I've had them for so long. But my wife says that I'm very intuitive, and if you're in it, you don't know it. And like I say that I don't recall my dreams, but I do wake up and think about some weird shit,
Yeah.
and I feel conscious when I'm thinking it. So that's sort of a lucid kind of dream.
Yeah.
But it's weird stuff I'm thinking about, and then all of a sudden it transitions into some kind of business making money thing, and then I got to get up and implement what it is.
And that crazy monkey brain trying to get in the way, right?
Yeah, because I wake up thinking something weird like a penguin on a unicycle or something. I start thinking, what the hell? Why am I thinking of that? And then my brain will start going off about, oh, I know this guy that he's the unicycling unicorn, and he might exhibit in my trade show because he's from like the North Metro area, and he travels around in a van. He's got a big giant unicycle, and he does shows in parking lots.
Sure.
So that's where my brain would just go with
Right.
stuff. All of a sudden, I tie it to it. But it started with thinking about something bizarre. So I do have dreams, but they're not like waking up and thinking about the dream. It's more, I feel conscious
Right.
or lucid making it up. Now, why the hell
While
am I
you're talking about that, just to plug you in that way, Synergy Collaborative, one of the best things about Synergy Collaborative is the fact that Brad knows so many people in the area, and he spends a lot of his time networking, and he meets people, and he really gets to know what about them is unique and how they would connect with other people. And he very intuitively puts people together in a way that helps them build strong long-term business relationships in a way that is beneficial to them both. And it's not necessarily always business relationships. Sometimes it's personal relationships that benefit you in a business fashion, because that is what people want to pay for, but they do it for personal reasons too sometimes. So yeah, definitely, if you've never tried out Synergy Collaborative before in that way.
Well, thank you for the plug.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Let's talk a little bit about that, because I think that my brain developed differently being a magician and learning about those things. So I flip things around often. But I think as far as business stuff, it's good to have a real relationship first, and the business comes later, rather than saying, hey, you want to buy a house, and then you find out that you don't like each other. Now you got problems. It's probably not going to happen, or
Right.
you're going to regret it because there was a Biden supporter and a Trump supporter, and I bought a house from a Biden supporter, and I don't want it. And you got this issue going on. You're not going to do any referrals. So why not get the relationship and get on the same page first, and then have the relationship or the business happen? And maybe it might not even be business. It might end up being more of a friendship relationship and then business referrals and stuff. But I see that stuff sort of intuitively when I see people. I go, oh, that person's got to connect with that person. And I've just been doing this stuff for so long. Like, say there was a guy that he was looking for landscaping and snow removal business.
Mm-hmm.
And he was looking for he wanted to do strip malls and apartment complexes.
Yeah.
So my brain went right to an organization called BOMA, which stands for Building Owners Managers Association.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you hang out.
Right.
That's where all those people are.
Yeah.
So rather than going to all these little networking events and talking to life coaches and multi-level marketing people and yoga instructors, and why not just go to the conference and hang out with building owners and talk to them and just
Right.
get the business. So I like the shortcut stuff. And this came about when I was doing my magic full time. I wanted to work corporate events, and there's an organization called Meeting Professionals International, and they're the meeting planners.
Right.
And usually the meeting planner not only does the corporate meetings, but they also do the holiday parties or the company picnics or trade shows or whatever.
Right.
And you just go to that organization, and that's where all the people are.
Right.
So it was kind of easy for me to do magic full time in the 90s because I had all those people. And I just see that ability, like your business. You want to do the microdose thing.
Yeah.
You find out who that perfect client is, and you find out where do they hang out.
Yep.
And you just go hang out in that spot, and now it's kind of easy rather than going to the grocery store and hoping that you might bump into somebody that might be into that kind of thing.
Exactly.
But those kind of people are probably more, I would say, hipster type.
Actually, you'd be surprised.
See, I'd be surprised.
You'd be
I am
surprised.
surprised.
So actually, the old school clientele. So I'm talking about the people who basically pioneered a lot of this. They're all corporate bigwigs. A lot of them are.
That's a good point. So it's like
Steve Jobs.
Like
Steve Jobs was big time into microdosing, and he would even do macrodoses. Like anytime there was a new product launch,
I shouldn't have said hipster. I should have said hippie.
Yeah, Steve Jobs is big time. He was big time into it. LSD particularly. Yeah, he would actually go do LSD trips, and LSD is actually so if you want to go with creativity, that's actually the bigger choice to make. Like you should go LSD versus mushrooms. Mushrooms is more for like heart headspace type thing. Whenever you like kind of want to have more of like healing or different things like that. But LSD is more headspace and creativity. And it kind of triggers more of that long-term creative stuff. And microdosing of that does for people what a lot of people will take Adderall for. It makes you hyper-focused, laser-focused. You can get more done in one day microdosing LSD than most people get done in a week.
Let me look at something and check something out here.
Yeah.
Hang on a second, folks. 36 minutes. Okay.
Yeah. So it's really funny. So corporate bigwigs, like who have to deal with new product launches, or people who have to do with creativity, people who are like producing video games, or maybe they're musicians that are trying to write a new song, or artists, painters. But I mean,
So
it's all walks of life.
Going through that direction of they've probably been there, done that as far as the recreational crap.
Yeah.
So now they're into, okay, I need to adjust some things. It's more a therapeutic process than recreation.
Yeah, it's very targeted. When you're doing something with microdosing, or you're past that I'm a teenager and wanting to just have fun phase, then you actually want to use it with purpose. And that's really that's the only way I'd want to use it, honestly. I mean, being a dumb teenager the way that I was, I definitely used it recreationally, but it was after an accidental dose. And I basically was like, oh yeah, this is fun type thing. But really the reality of the situation is it's if you use it with purpose, you will have an experience like nothing you've ever experienced if you did it recreationally. Like the experience will just take you so different into a different space.
You got an intention.
The medicine works with you.
Yeah. And you're probably in agreement.
Yeah.
Because the higher power probably isn't trying to gift you with a recreational good time. There's probably something of a higher purpose.
Yeah. Well, so this is a good example. So going back to the way that things happen magically, right? This is more mystical side of magic, right? And kind of the magic that Penn and Teller would frown upon. So you have a talk that was done actually very recently by Paul Stamets, who is the foremost mycologist in the whole world, studies mushrooms. And the mycology is, that's the network of the mushrooms beneath the surface. So that's the whole process of the growth of mushrooms, from spore all the way to mushroom, which is the fruit, right? So basically, what they were doing is they were studying the way that the mycelium would grow beneath us, right? And they were talking about how it's fascinating, but drumming and dancing cultures, and they would use these real low beats and they'd stomp the earth, and ritual performance of whatever they were doing actually would vibrate into the mycelium, and the mycelium would then carry that sound throughout the entire network of the mycelium. And then now you're having these mushrooms that grow, that are psychedelic mushrooms that you take them in, and they actually are sharing that experience back with you. It's really deep, but he actually was like talking about the science of how it actually is affecting the growth of the mycelium network and how they actually will hear and interpret those sounds, because it literally is like a neural network. They communicate. They actually help plants communicate with each other. A tree will know if another tree needs help with more water, and they will actually send their resources through the mycelial network to other trees. It's amazing. It's so fascinating, and that's why I think, like, honestly, I think that when we're consuming these mushrooms, I think personally that the mycelium is actually communicating with our brain the same way as it communicates. Because if you look under a microscope, it looks like a neural network. And I think that they communicate the same way. So when we consume it, they're literally just having a brain-to-brain communication, telepathic communication with us, if you will.
Yeah, I think I read something, or not, I don't read. I watched a video. Something like that. Yeah, definitely how there's a underground network of all those.
Yeah.
Like a root system almost.
Yeah.
But it travels, I guess, more fine. Is that a way of saying it? It's not like a thick root.
It's extremely fine, yeah. The dendrils, yeah, they're super small. They're just little tiny little filaments that connect. Yeah. But dendrils is one of the technical names.
It's wild.
Yeah.
Stuff like that just blows my mind sometimes. Like, how did the scientists figure that out?
Yeah.
You take it and tickle this mushroom over here, and then you're over here in New York, and you see if that one's laughing.
Well, now they actually have these little alligator clips that they can clip onto mycelium. They can actually connect them to either the mycelial network by sticking like a needle in to the network. To actually, they can take the electrical impulses and they can convert them to things like sound, or they can just read them, right? And they read them in like waves. Yeah, and then they can connect another one at another point, and they can see the communication going on. But the fascinating thing, even whenever they don't have the neural network that we can observe through the mycelium network, right? Or the root structure, because they're potted plants, like I'm pointing out my potted plants here. I know you guys can't see that. Pointing out my potted plants. So if I were to take one of those plants and I were to take a lighter and I would burn it, the whole entire rest of the plant systems in here, all of them would know it. They would scream, basically.
Even it's not going through the ground because the pots are separate.
Yeah, and somehow they still communicate. But when they have that neural network of the mycelial network, right? When they have that, the communication is even more so. So they can literally connect to one mycelial network on one side of the forest,
You think that
go to the other side of the forest, and they can actually go.
That's maybe because it's almost like an antenna.
It seems to be more complex than that, and I can't speak to it from any studies that I've done myself, just from communications that I've read from other mycologists who study this. And again, I point to Paul Stamets, because Paul Stamets is the one who actually has done the most amount of study in this area. And Paul Stamets, the way that he talks about it is that it's infinitely more complex, because when you're sending that information into the ground, or it receives information from something that's sending it, it's actually interpreting that information at the same time. So that shows an intelligence. even if that intelligence isn't something that we would necessarily.
And it's not
understand.
artificial.
It's not artificial. It is a full-on intelligence, and so that is it's far more complex.
Kind of like the Venus flytrap kind of situation, where it just knows and then it reacts.
Well, if you have a computer system, right, and you're trying to map subways in New York, which this is a study that they just recently did, trying to map all the subways in New York, and you're trying to come up with the most efficient structure for how all of these things are going to connect, how they're going to move, and everything else. Our best computers that are out there right now don't do as good of a job as mycelium. And they actually take the mycelium, they put it on a structure, and then they let it build. And they see the way that it starts interpreting the information and it starts growing and moving. They use that, and now, in order to map the most efficient structures for New York subway system. Because
the New York subway system is actually a mushroom system?
No. What I'm saying is that they can actually map the most efficient way for all the subway to move, utilizing mycelium now.
That's what I mean. So
they take a miniaturized structure of it, and they go boop, and they put it there, and then they go shh, and they watch the growth. And then they go, okay, that's the most efficient way now to move.
don't need engineers anymore.
Well, I mean, they used to use computer systems to do that, and as of, it's brand new. I think it was 9 months ago they discovered this. Now they're now using a fungus to do it. They just discovered it's better than any of the most powerful computers that they were using to do it before.
Are you talking about like just the distance, or incorporating the stops in comparison to the other?
Yeah. Where to stop, where to make connections, where to grow next, what the best flow of transport is, all of that. So if you were to start at point A, what's the most efficient way to get to point B? You go boop, and it goes
Kind of like GPS. Right?
Kind of, yeah. But they're like, that's part of how they know that this
The
works.
GPS system sometimes knows when traffic is heavy and when there's an accident and stuff, so it reroutes.
It can reroute, but the AI system that they're writing now is based off of, and this, again, this is all cutting edge. So like, this is like, you look this up. It's like 6 to 9 months ago. They I think it was 9 months ago. They started discovering this. It was about then whenever they first published their results. And they've been using this now for rerouting AI and stuff like that. So even Google is now starting to do experiments with this in order to teach the AI how to route better. It's fascinating. So the artificial intelligence isn't actually artificial. It's actually an intelligent type. Well, it's a form of intelligence that they're utilizing in this fungal network. But the mycelial network, where it's showing intelligence, like some form of intelligence, it's more complex than that, because the mycelial networks that are underground, right, that are in old forest growth and things like that, is a mix of thousands of different fungi. It's not just one type of fungi. And
It's even miraculous how a tree knows the root system goes down and looks for different minerals and water and stuff.
Right.
It kind of just finds its own way.
Which requires mycelium to break down some of those for them.
And some kind of intelligence.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
It is. It's so fascinating. Yeah. So I guess in the networking world, would that make you the mushroom of the networking world? You're the fruited body that helps the interface.
I don't even look. A lot of people think I know a lot of people. But I don't really know that many people. I mean, I'm connected with a lot of different networks, but I don't like the word networking. I think I might start having to call it something else, like Cilium.
There you go.
Cilium socials.
I think people would get the idea that it was something different than it was, but I can see why you would want to call it that because
networking, it seems like it's
Yeah.
straight lines from this network to that network, and it's always these little dots, and everything just connects to everything like a grid system. But it's really not that way. It's kind of like it's more emotional. It's more what's the word? Analog than digital.
yeah.
It's more female energy than logical male energy.
It totally makes sense. And if you actually look at the different things that they have learned about it over time, women oftentimes make better networkers than men. Oftentimes. And they're talking like
Because they're not
80%.
networking, they're actually connecting with the human being instead of, so you're in real estate, you probably have a lot of money. I could have some of that money if I had coffee with you. I'll buy dinner.
Right. It's true.
That's what's going on in their head. And say, hey, we should go talk about the game.
It's
interaction.
human connection versus sales.
Yeah.
Sales is I have a goal. Now I need to work towards that goal. So everything is based off
It's
of the
it's
predication.
marketing versus sales.
Yeah.
Because marketing doesn't really have a goal. It's just getting the word out there.
Yeah.
Spot. And the sale happens later.
Right.
And I believe that women are better. That's what's happening right now with the whole Elizabeth's doing this women's empowerment thing here, starting back up in January, I take it.
Yes. Yes. You can if you look on yourauthenticreflections.com, you can buy tickets right now. And I don't think the next one is completely sold out yet, but it's close.
So it'll be here right at Peak
Tickets.
Studios.
Right at Your Authentic Reflection Studios, yeah.
Yes.
Right here in New Hope.
Is that what it's called?
Your Authentic Reflections, yeah.
It could be called Peak Studios too.
it could, but
It's not.
You will not find it online if you look it up by that.
No, you know how to find it. Just follow the Cilium.
There you go. Yeah, that's right. If you find the right kind of mushroom, you can eat it, and it will tell you where to find me.
Sure, follow me, find Casey. But it's interesting how the whole energy shift, everything's getting to be more, so I'll say analog, female, emotional. All the stuff is getting to be that way, and the logic of business isn't the same anymore.
I think we as people are beginning to integrate more. Because for a long time there, for the last 120, 130 years, we have been so stuck in this headspace of having to be hyper-logical about everything that it's caused us to suppress the heart space. And that spiritual space has even suffered. So we were not integrated. We were not fully integrated. And now COVID has forced us to look for a different way to reconnect.
Yes.
So all of a sudden, COVID, everybody's locked up and everybody's like, how do I connect with people? And a lot of us started going back into that heart space, and we started feeling a lot of that.
First they went into the online. Found out that that's not near as fulfilling as people meeting people.
It started crashing right around that time too, because people started figuring out that it was doctored. That, let's talk about where Twitter was, right? So Twitter was one of the biggest culprits in this whole expose of how they were doctoring social media. It was Facebook and Twitter were the two big ones that people were like, oh my God, look at they're trying to control us. Twitter is being run out of one of the most socially liberal, I would call them radical areas in the entire world. It was being run out of San Francisco. Not just San Francisco, out of a very specific sector of San Francisco that is known for its absolutely radical hyper left, almost coming into a complete 180 of where everybody else is mindset. And therefore, everybody else was right, if not far right.
You know, what's
And they would
interesting,
block it all.
there's something interesting about the whole digital age. That is the platforms like Facebook and Twitter and Google and all that stuff. But before that, there was the media networks, you know, those TV networks,
Yeah.
and they weren't connected. Obviously, like everything is, we know that you can connect LinkedIn and Facebook.
Yeah.
Do that, but we never knew that NBC and CBS were connected. But they are.
Some people didn't know. I knew. But the average
Most
person,
people look at them as different channels, but they're still
yeah.
on the same. I don't know if CBS and NBC were on the same page, but there are networks that are doing the same thing.
Well, it's all
This is
being
getting
run.
deep.
Well, yeah. I mean, this is where it gets into what a lot of people thought was conspiracy territory. And honestly, everybody thought that way for the most part, other than the tinfoil hat people, right? They thought that it was all conspiratorial. However, when you follow the trail, and this almost came out right after 9/11. There was this whole expose that ended up happening where basically in Iraq at the time, if not, it could have been Afghanistan, but at the time there was a BBC News reporter who was there. They were reporting certain things that they didn't actually like. And the head of the BBC at the time, who owned most of the media, and by most, I mean like 95% of the media in the entire world. He was the principal owner of all of it. He ended up burying, single-handedly choosing what was going to be seen by people.
And you can't do that so much with the social media platforms. So the individual social media platforms.
Yeah, and WikiLeaks.
Yeah.
WikiLeaks ended up showing it, and if everybody recalls, that was during the time frame where all of a sudden WikiLeaks became an enemy of the state, basically. They started going after Julian Assange, and they were like trying to bust the dude, and all of a sudden he's this bad guy everywhere, and he was having to run for his life, and it was crazy. It was crazy, but it all came from that one expose. It wasn't anything else that everybody talked about. That was all mind games to get people away from that one expose that happened that was trying to show that all the media was being run by one dude in the entire world.
And now it's kind of run by one concept.
Well, no, it's still all owned by if you follow the money trail just now stops at a certain point. It's one holding company.
What I mean is it's getting to be, it's not using, it's hard to express this, but it's not necessarily using that digital method of doing it, because now it's in more the psychological method of doing it. Indoctrination.
Oh, yeah, the indoctrination, yes.
Yeah, people are starting to go one direction and they have no idea why they are. And that goes into the magic thing
Yeah,
of how to misdirect the eye.
that goes all the way back to Bernays.
Yeah,
Actually, it goes back to Bernays' uncle.
that kind of stuff.
Yeah, Bernays,
We're at 6 o'clock now.
so Bernays' uncle
Yes.
He's going to sign off with Bernays.
is an extremely famous psychologist. He's trying to think of the name of the psychologist. He's the one who was writing about, the Oedipus complex, and he was doing all the studies on how, sexual repression was causing problems. Sigmund Freud, that was Edward Bernays' uncle. And Edward Bernays,
It's got more knowledge.
based on that work and everything else, he wrote a book called Propaganda, which you can find for free online. So this is not conspiracy theory. Just read it. It's called Propaganda by Edward Bernays. You can find it online and read it. It's a very interesting read. And he actually talks about how the people are sheep and they need to be led. And how the way to do that is to completely change the way they think by showing concepts the way you want them to think.
Well, that's a good one to sign off with because the topic was magic, and believe it or not, there's ways of doing that. Getting
magic.
people to pick the card that you want them to pick, just by you can lead people down a path. It's true. So, okay, see, this has been interesting. It started out with magic and got into some other topics. It's amazing what we can pack into an hour.
It all ties in.
It does. It's to me, all this stuff is all perceived reality. And it's what's around you is how you perceive. Is Trump the bad guy? Is Biden the bad guy? Is magic mushrooms bad for you? Is it a drug?
Yeah.
It's all perception.
Right?
You know, it's a law. There's a law of gravity. Is that true?
Law of gravity.
Yeah.
That's a different topic. Yeah,
It is.
we'll have to talk about that another time because law of gravity has a bunch of really funny things that
There's
happen with it too.
The whole physics and all that, the whole concept of things being solid aren't necessarily solid, and there is no spoon. Which maybe next time we'll talk about the person that directed the movie The Matrix and The Terminator and how they're connected.
Mhm.
You know about that?
Oh yeah.
There we go. We got a new topic. We'll talk about it next time. So that's all I've got for you, folks. Thanks, Casey. Appreciate you. I'm going to turn this thing off.
Awesome.
Peace, love, and happiness. Enjoy the rest of your day. Be good, be kind, be nice. Did I say be nice? Be nice.